I'd like to extend a warm thanks to the organisers, to Monsignor Sanchez, for hosting this much-needed workshop. We're very pleased to be here as part of this roundtable discussion looking at community efforts to tackle the harms caused by drugs. One of the aims of this workshop is to look at solutions to the problems drugs cause. And I wish to focus on the role that community actors can play in treating addiction and problematic drug use. An effective and humane drug treatment service needs to be at the heart of any drug policy solution. And to this end, I'd like to share with you some findings from a 3-year study of community treatment in Gothenburg, Sweden, which was part of our national initiative, the 3 City Project. I'd also like to credit many of the other people involved in the 3 City Project, some of whom are here today. Now I've lost my slides. It's always important when discussing research findings from one study, as you know, to be mindful of differences in context. What works in one place may not work in another due to differences in culture, economy, government. I think the treatment issues we face in Sweden may be completely different to the treatment issues you face in your own countries. So quickly about Sweden, it's often held up as an example of a successful welfare state, and true, it is a comparatively wealthy country, low unemployment, stable government. Its 2 major cities, Gothenburg and Stockholm, may seem relatively small in comparison to where you're from. Sweden is a highly secular country and famous for its promotion of values of tolerance, openness, and principles of fair and just treatment for all, often taken as givens alongside a belief in or even expectation it's the state that will support individuals in need and that the state will do this fairly. So combined with high public spending on health and a high trust in government, one would think that there are optimum social and economic conditions for tackling narcotics at every level, prevention, treatment and control. But when it comes to narcotics policy and practice in Sweden, we're faced with some contradictions. Politically, there is cross-party consensus on a zero-tolerance agenda, and this is backed up by stringent legislation where all possession or use of drugs is criminalised. And Swedish drug policy is often cited as being 3-pronged, with an equal focus on prevention, law enforcement and treatment. This doesn't mean to say that Sweden is against harm reduction. In fact, Sweden perhaps traditionally has been bad at harm reduction. This is starting to change slowly. So harm reduction is in there as part of drug treatment. And the public expenditure figures to some extent support this. Sweden has the 2nd highest public expenditure on drug interventions in the EU. And around 40% of this goes on health, much of it devolved to local level, to social services, to local health services. The amount of young people trying drugs in Sweden is very, very low. This is a list in the diagram you see here. Sweden's way down. It's a list of young people aged 16 who've tried drugs for Sweden in a European context. But when it comes to the proportion of addicts, people with problematic drug use, Sweden has average levels. So here you could draw the conclusion that Sweden is good at preventing young people trying drugs, and we heard from some of the examples from Yvonne, but less so at preventing drug addiction. And while these figures, low rates of youth trying drug use and average levels of problematic drug use, can seem promising, Sweden has the highest proportion of drug offences in the EU. This can be understood against the background of a zero-tolerance policy and a considerable police focus on prosecuting small-scale drug crime, resulting in young people being fined, not necessarily going into treatment. Sweden also has the 2nd highest proportion of deaths from overdose in the EU. This is currently rising. I think these contradictions speak to some real challenges in treating drug addiction in an effective, also a humane way. Challenges that occur even in a wealthy and stable country like Sweden. And part of the problem is that the national policy, with its emphasis on control via criminal justice, has traditionally been quite weak when it comes to treatment and just how treatment should be done. And it was just this issue of local level community efforts, local level treatment that the 3 City Project in part aimed to address. In Sweden, much of the prevention and treatment policy and practice is decided at the local level, yet there are no national evaluations of this. Little is known about what models are used, let alone what effects these treatment models have. So the 3 City Project aimed to, as a government-funded project, to combine research and practice to develop knowledge around both universal prevention, intervention and treatment, there was a focus on youth and young adults. And in particular, quite unique for Sweden, there was a heavy emphasis on cannabis use. This is the most commonly used narcotic in Sweden among young people and adults. And even when you look at people presenting for treatment, cannabis is the second highest primary drug given at point of treatment. There's been a view in Swedish politics that cannabis use represents a serious threat to the ideal of the drug-free society, and also a growing concern about the long-term psychological and social effects of heavy cannabis use. So the focus on cannabis in this project can be understood stemming in part from a desire to reduce harm in relation to the damage caused by heavy cannabis use, but also as a rhetorical or political message about the importance of the zero-tolerance society. So the Gothenburg treatment study, I said I wanted to share some findings regarding community treatment, which may be, and I hope, applicable to other contexts. This was the only sub-project in this three-city project to look at community treatment. Remember that Sweden spends a lot of public money on treatment, yet little is known about its models or its effects. The city of Gothenburg, for a number of years, has run a specialist treatment group with city-wide open access coverage. This means that treatment is free, and also there are no exclusion criteria apart from extreme or severe mental health problems. And there are 3 treatment centres located across the city in places, a little like you can see here in the picture, ordinary locations, ease of access, and I think non-stigmatised locations is really important to think about. Another feature of the treatment programme is it's primarily non-medical and non-diagnostic. Instead, individualised and holistic packages of psychosocial treatment are given. These are provided by staff with a minimum of 3.5 years university education in social work or psychology, and often with postgraduate psychotherapy qualifications. The study aimed to describe the treatment model in quite some detail, understand treatment mechanisms, this included client process engagement, and evaluate treatment effect. And I want to share just 5 key findings with you that I think would be most relevant for this workshop. Firstly, the treatment model has comparatively good results in terms of dropout completion rates, reductions in drug use, improvement in psychosocial factors. The results were comparative to other community treatment models. And I think that this suggests there's a place in this discussion for this kind of open access, individualized and holistic psychosocial treatment. Many clients, however, had strong concerns and worries about entering a treatment centre run by the authorities. Remember, this is the zero-tolerance context in Sweden. Many clients were concerned with how they would be treated. Would they lose their driving licence? Would they be reported to the police? Would they lose their children? These are real concerns that potentially provide barriers to entering treatment. Now, as part of the study, we had, in line with usual research ethics, made clear that clients could be anonymous. Nearly everyone in the study cited that this calmed their worries about entering treatment run by the authorities. Yet only one person in the study actually chose to be anonymous. And I think this suggests to me that we need to be clear to potential clients about how anonymity will be handled in entering treatment, at least in strict legislative contexts like in Sweden. Clients highly valued the individual, holistic, and non-judgmental focus, often citing that this allowed them to address what they saw as the real problem behind their addiction. A key aspect of the treatment style is a non-judgmental approach. And this too was valued by clients. You can see in the picture here a typical treatment room where there's emphasis on a relaxed and respectful environment, a meeting between equals. Such a non-judgmental approach was seen by clients as central in establishing a sound therapeutic alliance with their treatment worker. Often we want to provide moralistic arguments or moralistic values or provide hard arguments against drug use as though we can somehow persuade addicts out of their addiction. This study suggests otherwise, that an empathic and non-judgmental approach has a positive effect for engagement in treatment. A 4th point concerns a fundamental question of what do we mean with treatment. Although detoxification and withdrawal was a key process in any treatment package, clients often saw that withdrawal as something fairly unproblematic. Although remember, this was primarily a study on cannabis. The difficult part for most clients was the psychological and social changes that need to come once a person has got their drug use under control. For some people, a return to ordinary life was fairly unproblematic. There was a wide range of socio-economic backgrounds. But for many clients, a return to ordinary life involved considerable hurdles in renegotiating family and social networks, re-entering the employment market, finding new housing. This suggests that successful community treatment is much more than managing withdrawal or becoming drug-free. If we are really to have long-term effects, I would argue that it's a treatment that comes once a person has got their drug use under control. That treatment is a treatment that makes a difference in the long term, and this too needs to be highly individualized. So a final point, which I think the findings mentioned so far speak to, is the complexities of treating drug addiction in the community, and in particular the need for multi-agency and multi-specialist teams. So if I conclude with three main messages from this study to this workshop about improving community treatment, it is these. To improve access to treatment, this may depend on the socio-economic situation where you are. All too often there are too many restrictions to treatment, hoops addicts must jump through to gain entry to treatment, and many of these restrictions may be more of a hinder than a help, especially when they serve to reinforce rather than remove the stigma of seeking treatment. In countries with a heavy focus on criminal justice, such as in Sweden, we may benefit by making clear to prospective clients that they can be anonymous in treatment. Secondly, adopt an individualized and holistic, non-judgmental treatment style. More often than not, the problem isn't first and foremost the drugs, but a complex of psychosocial factors sustaining the addiction. It is these that need to be treated once a person has the drug use under control. Which suggests that alongside withdrawal and drug reduction approaches, psychological and social aspects to treatment need to be provided by well-trained and specialist staff. I think the more we can find our common humanity in how we treat drug addiction, the more effective the treatment will be. Thank you.